to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jodi Lynn and
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
So, Jodi Lynn, I after last week's show, as I was just telling you before we got started here, I was kind of under the weather, and I'm glad to be back. On top of the weather? Is that the opposite of under the weather?
I don't know. I think so.
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, last week, you may not have noticed, but I wasn't quite my usual self. I was very, tame and not engaging a whole lot because I was not feeling really good. But I'm back, and I'm probably even sounding better. At least I sound better to myself. So
you do.
I do sound better, really?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, I was kind of hoarse last week. That's true. So anyway.
It's just the vibrancy in your voice is back. I can tell you have more energy.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So we had a guest scheduled for today, but that didn't actually work out. So we're going to do something we haven't done in a while, which is just you and me talking about stuff. And it occurred to me that a couple weeks ago, we had Darlene Green on, who was telling us about these remarkable light reflecting patches that you buy and put on your skin and so forth. And it turns out both of us are going to try it out. In fact, I'm already in the process of doing a trial at my end. But one of the things that I thought that would be kind of fun to talk about is, I mean, when you have a guest on, you're trying to feature the guest, you're trying to feature what it is they're interested in and so forth. And of course, we were, speaking for myself, I was really hooked into, how enthusiastic she is, and I was buying into the enthusiasm. Like, this is really great. I can't believe this. It's a product that actually, it works with light, and it works with personal energy and all that kind of thing. But now that I got the patches, now I'm actually, it's time for the, putting the pedal to the metal kind of a thing. And now I'm dealing with the real world of, okay, so does this stuff actually work? After all the hype, after all the excitement, am I going to actually get better? And for myself, I'm testing it with, I for like the last 5 or 6 months, I've had an issue with my Achilles tendon and knee and ankle on my right leg. And I've been going to physical therapy and making some progress there, but tendons are really slow to heal. And so it's been a very, very, very slow process. So I'm hoping this actually speeds that up. Now, I can't honestly say this is a good scientific test because I'm still going to therapy. I mean, so if I get better, is it the therapy that's doing it? Is it the patch? Is it a combination? I mean, I don't really know. You got a multivariate situation, right? But I figure, I know how slow the healing process has been with just the therapy. So I'm figuring, well, if I pick up speed on that, if the healing increases in speed, I figured that's an indication that this patch thing is actually going to work. So that's kind of my test. But the reason I mention all that is, after all this, the excitement, after the thrill, and we're both buying into it, we're actually trying to practice out, the skepticism starts to set in a little bit. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on that, and then just see where we go with that conversation. Because this is a really exciting thing. These whole patches thing, they're reflecting our body light back into us. That's like talking about vibration and how it directly impacts our lives, and how our bodies are directly involved, and our mental processes are directly involved. That's like right in line with what we've been talking about for years here on the show. So it's almost like we're being put to the test. It's kind of scary.
It's a jumping off point. Do you have faith?
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's the point right there.
Yeah, that's so funny. And it's hilarious that, well, it's not hilarious, but it's interesting how, like, after you got off the call and whatever, like, I don't know how long the time was in between, like, the way that you were feeling on the call versus the skepticism setting in, whether that was like days or whatever. But for me, I don't know if it's my naive nature or my hopeful outlook, or you could insert any word here that you think would apply. I haven't hit that skepticism yet.
You haven't? Oh, okay.
I have not, but I also haven't gotten the patches. I've ordered them and they're on their way. Actually, they were delivered to the Home Depot in the town that I live next to, but nobody called me. So I got a notice that they're going to be sent back today, and was like, oh no. And I had to call the Home Depot where Purolator drops off packages, and was like,
Okay.
please don't send them. So I haven't gotten them yet, but my friends have. And so I've been curiously picking their brain, but it's
Yeah.
interesting. I noticed my own reaction. And this is typical when I ask one of my friends to do something or try something or whatever. I don't want to disappoint them.
Yeah,
So
sure.
is it working?
Right.
What do you think? Like, give me your numbers on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, let's go through the metrics. You know, is your sleep better? Is this? And I haven't even tried the product.
I'm with you. By the way, you said you weren't sure when it was that the skepticism kicked in. It kicked in on the day when I received the patches and started applying the first one to my skin.
Oh, so
It
maybe
didn't
I'm
actually
not there.
kick into that. Yeah, so I
Oh,
mean, if you follow my pattern anyway. I don't know if you'll follow my pattern, but that's what my pattern was.
I don't know. I feel I don't have a lot of ailments, or so I think. You know, like on the outside, I feel pretty
That's
good.
actually an interesting point right there. I mean, does this actually generate ailments in our mind? Like, oh, what do I need to heal?
Well, you know, like I mean, I've had stomach issues in the past. I've experienced fertility issues in the past. So maybe there is a bigger issue going on within that I'm not aware of. But
Okay.
on a day-to-day basis, you know, I don't take any medications. I don't have any like diagnosed diseases or things that are really things that I want to work on. So for me, what I've been grappling with is how do I test this if things are actually getting better? And
Right.
so Darlene gave us like a sheet, like a little box of the different things that you can measure. And I made an entire page
Oh, okay.
of things to measure because, you know, I could think of things, you know, like how's my eyes in the morning? Like, do they feel sleepy or tired? Like, how's my my energy levels in the morning? But how are
Right.
they in the afternoon? I want to track the difference between the two and my sleep and at all of these different things, my scars, you know, just different things than I think most people would put on their list. But I needed some metrics to be able to test the theory of, is this working?
Okay. So basically, you established a baseline for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which makes sense. Right. And Darlene, to be fair, Darlene was encouraging me to do the same thing. But I just started testing before I even had the baseline. So screw that.
I'm surprised because you're so scientific.
I know. Yeah, it's true. And yet, I think I know why. It's because for me, the only real test is what happens to the discomfort that I feel. Because it's not consistent. I mean, actually, when I'm really up and around doing things, unless I've already been really working the Achilles, right leg, all that kind of stuff, most of the time I don't feel anything. It doesn't hurt. But if I've been overdoing it in some way, or if I've just been, reclined for like 6 hours and now I have to get the blood going again, either way, then I'm going to tend to feel the discomfort. And so I figured, well, that's really the test. Can I get rid of the discomfort? Or even it gets to the point of pain at some points. Can I get it to the point where I'm not feeling that anymore? And like I said, the therapy that I've been working on has been working toward that goal. But the bad news, and also the good news in the same handle, is it's been a very slow process. So the bad news has been a slow process. The good news is that because it's a slow process, if this process speeds up, then I know that they've done something because I know what the speed is. It's really,
That's
really
right.
slow. It's incrementally slow. Like, oh my God, it's so painful in terms of how slow the process
Yeah.
is. I have seen it. I'm glad actually my therapist points out to me, this is where you're doing well. I'm like, oh yeah, I can tell that. You're right. But I always want to measure it the way everybody else does. How much does it hurt? That to me is the indicator, because
Yeah.
ultimately that's what we're trying to get rid of. We're trying to get rid of that pain, right?
Yeah.
Once the pain goes away, it's like we feel like we're healed.
Yep.
Not necessarily the way that the medical world would look at it, not the way necessarily that our body looks at it, but it's the way we look at it. I don't want to feel bad anymore. If I'm not feeling it bad anymore, great, I'm healed.
Yeah. Well, and to a certain extent, I think that the pharmaceutical world does look at it that way because they'll give you a pill for your headache. It doesn't actually take care of the root cause, but you don't feel it anymore. Voila, I am cured.
Yeah, except they don't even say that that's a cure. Actually, interesting thing about the medical world, nothing has ever cured. They have no cures for anything.
Isn't that
They-
sad?
it's really kind of strange.
Like, would you buy a car that never ran? Like, or a part for a car that never, like, it worked temporarily, but, not well, and it's never going to fix the problem. It's basically like duct taping your bumper or
Well,
something.
a lot of this comes from. There's a whole history of this we could go into, and I don't think it's necessarily the appropriate topic for today's show, but a lot of this goes back to the origins here in the U.S. of medicine and how it evolved into the current medical models. I mean, if you go back far enough, you can find back in the 19th century. I mean, there were doctors, but the doctors didn't have a whole lot they could do. And the little bit amount that they could do, they would do. But there were also people who were selling patent medicines, often called snake oil, because sometimes they were made from snake oil. And the big complaint that the official doctors had was that the snake oil peddlers were promising cures, and then nobody was actually getting cured. And so a lot of the ways that medicine was kind of taken over by what we now know of as the mainstream was based on the idea, well, we got to stop these people who are claiming these false cures. And the reason I find that to be so ironic is the people who replace them also don't have any cures. There don't seem to be any cures in their world.
But it's okay when they don't cure you.
Yeah,
as long as the
for some
false people
reason.
don't pretend to.
Right. It's kind of an odd thing.
Yeah. Absolutely it is.
It's kind of like they don't want anybody to ever be cured of anything. I mean, they do, but it'll never happen.
Well, and maybe it's like a collective industry. I don't want to say belief. Like, I don't think the people are bad. I think that there's a lot of good doctors trying to do a lot of good things, but they're limited. And maybe it's the belief that things can't be cured. You can't be healed.
There may be part of that. But I think there's also another piece that's really big. And this does go back to the earliest days of medicine here in the US anyway, in that there was a push primarily by the money interests, by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and so forth, to make sure that only accredited institutions could issue medical degrees. And in other words, it was all about the authority.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the authority that has given you your doctorate? What's the authority that says you know what you're doing when it comes to practicing medicine? And the entire structure was built on this idea of authority. There's a couple of odd things about authority. One odd thing about authority is, in order to be recognized as an authority, you have to be recognized by another authority. But who picked the original authority?
I don't know.
Well, there's actually an answer to this. If you look into it, this whole concept of authority within medicine was not developed by a doctor. It was developed by an educator who was hired by, I think it was by the Carnegie Institute. I'm not sure who he was hired by. I can't remember. But anyway, he was hired to come up with a way to have a better, more reliable medical system. And this was the guy who said, we need to credentialize. We need to make sure that credentials are what are driving the whole thing, because the credentials ensure that good science is being done. That was the theory that he was proposing, which, by the way, is not true. But nevertheless, that was the theory. And what comes out of that, a few things happened out of that. First, and this is a big deal because of the US's history, a lot of the schools that failed to get accreditation were schools for Black people. It was a racist thing. Yeah. Yeah, because they didn't have the funds, they didn't have the backing to afford to go through the accreditation process that these early leaders wanted everybody to go through. So there were a number of schools that were unaccredited and therefore basically excluded from the medical model. And a lot of them were what they call Negro schools. Oh, wow, holy cow. That's kind of it fits American history, but it's kind of a shock, right?
Yeah.
So you got that going on. And then you also have going on the fact that if an institution was being excluded, a lot of it had to do not so much with whether or not they were doing good science, but whether or not they were doing science that matched the model that this educator laid out, because the educator basically laid out a pharmaceutical model. In other words, it was a model for finding drugs and what is the appropriate and acceptable way to create drugs. And it was essentially the Bible upon which the pharmaceutical industry was built in this country.
So it became from the very beginning about drugs.
It did.
And not healing or curing somebody.
Right. Which was a shift, because up until that point, it was about curing and healing. Now, there's also a secondary thing that goes along with, so I find to be fascinating, which is that science has never been, historically speaking anyway, has never been about proving anything. And this is a point I've made numerous times here on the program. Since this new model has come into existence, the people who do the research almost never use the word prove, but the people who talk about the research, the media and so forth, they're the ones who talk about proof. So we have this really odd situation where authorities, so-called, are generating solutions that do not have proof attached to them. They have evidence, but not proof. They have studies and conclusions, but not proof. And their studies are being treated as if they are proof by the mainstream public. The reason I find that to be fascinating is it's not all that different from the way the public would treat the snake oil salesman. Because the snake oil salesman would point to, somebody got healed and there's proof. Which means that this whole idea of curing and proving has never really gone away. It's just been put into different clothing. Into something
a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Well, kind of, a little bit, yeah, but more just it's more of an exclusionary clothing, right? Unless you're part of the inner circle, you're not allowed to engage in it, and once you engage in it, you're still not allowed to engage in it.
You can't change it. You just got to keep it the same.
Got to keep it the same.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that came out of this is medical schools from that point on. This was turn of the 20th century, roughly speaking. From that point on, medical schools became very, what's the word I want to look? Very ingrained in the way they did things, because once they got their accreditation, they didn't want to lose it. Now, accreditation today isn't quite as big a deal as it was then. It's still a big deal, but not back then. It was life or death, and by life or death, I mean life or death of the institution. So it was a really, really, really big deal. The accreditation forces led people who were running these institutions to establish a baseline. We were talking about baselines earlier. Well, they have a baseline too about how they operate their schools and what are their a priori assumptions that are behind the research that they do and the things that they teach and so forth. And they have not changed them over the years. We're 100 years on and running from when all that first started, and those a priori assumptions have not changed, which is understandable. But it's also kind of odd because a lot of the assumptions involve understandings of medicine that are now dated.
Right.
So
they're out of date too.
Medicine's a priori assumptions have not kept up with medical research. And so we end up in a time where it becomes almost, I don't know, what's the word to use? Chaotic. Let's put it that way. That seems a gentler term than most. It's chaotic because if you're a researcher and you're pushing that envelope, you're often pushing the envelope against the very same institution that gave you your degree in the first place. That's going to create a lot of
deters people from doing it.
I think so, to a certain degree, sure. Yeah. Because also you're still dealing with the authority givers. Who are the authority givers? The people who gave you your degree. And who when you become the authority, you become the person to have the authority to decide who gets the degree after that. So there's that chain of authority that goes on. That chain of authority is pretty strong. It's pretty fixed, pretty set in its ways. It doesn't like to change.
No. No, it doesn't.
No, change is not. You don't find the word change in any of the founding documents of these things. It's not part of their thought process.
Which is sad.
Well, it's also anti-scientific.
Yeah.
It is.
Isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, one of the great beauties of 19th century scientific inquiry was everybody was an amateur scientist. There was no such thing as a professional scientist in the 19th century. It didn't exist. So everybody was an amateur. So it wasn't about, protecting your discovery, patenting it, trying to monetize or anything like that. So there's a great deal more sharing of information. Now almost nothing gets shared.
Mm-hmm.
And the little that does get shared has to go through special journals and processes to make it, quote, peer-reviewed, unquote. Well, peer-reviewed used to mean that other amateurs would look at your amateur work and give you some feedback on it. That's not what it means anymore.
What does it mean now?
Well, you'd probably get a lot of different answers on that, depending on which journal you're talking about and which researchers you're talking about and what their attitudes are and so forth. But my take on it is that today it isn't so much about sharing the ideas and tossing them around and playing with them. It's about shooting down ideas, especially ideas that go against the norm, go against the status quo. And to me, that's a disturbing factor, because what that really means is science has become tearing down somebody else's work. It's never really that in the first place. Back in the 19th century, it wasn't about tearing down somebody else's work. Actually, more often than not, it was about trying to find ways to, okay, here's the part that does work, but here's the part that does work. You might want to include that. That conversation doesn't happen as much anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I think it stifles, I don't know if the right word is ingenuity, but that innovation that people have, that creativity that people have. And I think it's really interesting because this same process, whatever, idea that we're talking about right now, I feel like it's happened in all the industries, or most of the industries out there in the world today. What have we done over the last, I'll say, 20 years that has really impacted in a positive way humanity or the world?
I think it depends on what your viewpoint is. I would say smartphones.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
They're going to be
that could go either way.
Yeah, exactly. That's just it. It depends on your viewpoint. Some people are going to tell you that's a big negative, but
yeah, made things more convenient.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But
yeah,
our technology. Okay, we could leave that out of the conversation. But we start thinking about a lot of the other processes that we have for fundamental daily life and making that better outside of technology. What have we done? Our food, it's not better. Not at all.
Now there's an authority speaking right there, because you're a farm girl.
Yeah, right. But I would be, what did they call the amateur? I would be considered an amateur.
True.
Because of the certification bodies and whatever, all of that. I mean, we're, as a farm, we're not for getting our organic certification because it feels like a money grab. It costs a bunch of money to get a certificate that they, sometimes they check, sometimes they don't. Organic is a little bit more specific than other things that I've heard of, like the dolphin safe, but they have a lot of these certifications that cost you piles and piles of money. And for what? We don't put any pesticides or anything like that, any chemicals on any of our food. We don't. So, and I guess you can't just trust people anymore. And that's the whole point for certification. But it just feels like, you're growing all of these things without chemicals, or that's our intention, is to grow them without chemicals so they actually nurture a person's body and they do what food should do. Take care of you and, help you grow and sustain life and thrive. And then we stick an organic certificate or a sticker on it, and now it's double or triple the price. So the average person can't really afford those things. They
That's a
don't buy
great
them.
point. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great
So
point.
are we really doing anything for anybody? No.
Well, it's an example of that authority thing. That's exactly
Yeah.
what that is. The certificate authority is the one that you're paying that fee to. And you're raising a very valid question. Why is that fee really worthwhile? I mean, if you're already doing the stuff, if you're already acting like that, is that fee really worthwhile? Well, from one perspective, it is because it gives you access to distribution outlets you wouldn't normally have. But from another perspective, not sure. And like you said, it drives the cost up pretty significantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Absolutely. I mean,
so
not
this
all of it is the cost of certification, but now they have a
right.
fancy title. So now we can charge buttloads for an apple or a carrot that is grown
Which explains
organically.
something. Why is it that always the organic food is more expensive? You just kind of gave us one reason why that may be true.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it also indicates,
Absolutely.
well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be more
Mhm.
expensive.
Yeah. I mean, there's other things that go into it. I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater because I think, there's some fertilization or, preparation of the soil. Like we've commercialized, in my opinion, we've commercialized our lives to make things so much easier that we've lost a lot along the way, like the nutrition value of certain things, but also like taking care of the soil. We have chemicals to do these things now instead of perhaps other methods, but it goes right back to that innovation conversation. We're not forced to innovate. We have the chemical right there. It might be expensive, but you get the chemical on the field, takes care of the weeds, you're going to have more yield theoretically. And then you're able to sell more. So it outweighs the lower cost of it, but it's not healthy for people. Or you go the organic way and you're not using anything for that pesticide to get the bugs away. But you don't get as high of yield because now you have more weeds and pests and all of these other things. So you sell less. But what if there was another way? Like started to learn about electroculture, and I haven't delved into it enough to understand all of the things, but there's classical music. That's how I revived our pumpkin plant that was on death's door.
Wow.
And she grew beautifully. I played classical music to her. I talked to her, I did some Reiki healing on her. All of these things. There's all of these other things that maybe don't cost a thing,
Yeah.
or are very out there that an amateur might try, but the professionals or the certified people are like, oh no, you'll kill things. My friend Ange, she planted a garden. I think it was her first garden in her backyard, and she tried electroculture because she was like, hey, whatever. And her plants, like her potato bushes, were like 4 feet tall. I've
Wow.
never seen a potato bush 4 feet tall. Like, what? And the yields that she got off of all of this stuff was absolutely insane, more than her and her family could eat. So why aren't we doing more of that stuff, getting, being inventive? Because we don't have to.
It's an interesting point that we're raising here. I mean, this originally came out of the conversation of the patches that Darlene Green brought up, and how you and I are choosing individually to deal with how we're going to individually test this stuff. I think the reason I brought all this up is because I want to make the point that how we decide to test doesn't have to match somebody else's idea of what rigorous testing is.
Mm-hmm.
Because their idea of what rigorous testing is hasn't worked out all that well.
That's right. When you really unpack it, would you trust it if you knew all the things that you just said? I have less faith in that authority figure. And it's interesting what we do with authority. We were talking about this last week, I think, with our guest of, her doctor had said, you have breast cancer, and they removed the breast, and then they were like, you need to go through radiation or different treatments, and you have to. That's what the doctor says is this is the only way.
This is the protocol.
Are you sure? Yeah. Like for me, a couple of weeks ago, my doctor called me, and I just had another ectopic pregnancy in September, which was awful.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. And then I was waiting. You have to go through a protocol to make sure everything's like cleaned out and whatever. So we did that chemically. And then you go through all these blood tests and make sure everything's gone. And then so the doctor finally calls me because now it's been enough time and I've had enough blood tests. My tests are showing at like negative, like plus or minus 5 or whatever is where their threshold is. So they're like, yep.
Within the desired limits is basically what it
is. Yeah, exactly. Within the desired limit, so that they consider that you're done. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm waiting to hear from my doctor, like, what's the next step? And she calls me and she says, so I had my right tube removed in 2019 and I just have one now. And she says, your other tube, it's garbage. I recommend that you stop trying and I'm going to send you to the fertility clinic. And if you're going to go through IVF, they're going to want to remove the other tube. And I mean, obviously that's heartbreaking news to hear. All I've ever wanted really is a family. So that was really tough to stomach all of that. But it really got me thinking and asking, like, I have that tube there. What's wrong with it? I don't know. That was her answer. I don't know. Okay, well, can't we do something to find out? No. There's no point. But what do you mean there's no point? Like in my position, like IVF is, $20,000 for a 33% shot.
Wow.
At having a baby.
Yeah,
that's your first try.
Right.
Yeah. And then you have to pay more money and you can have a second shot and a third shot, depending on how many eggs you have and all of that. And, every place around the world is a little bit different for prices. Right. But you're telling me that we shouldn't look at something I already have. Like, oh no, because you had this, there's nothing that you can do. And I was obviously frustrated about that. She said they won't do any more testing. I haven't been to the fertility clinic yet to ask that question. But I will ask, is there more tests? Because I can Google it and it says that there's more tests that we can do. Why are we not doing more tests? Why are we not doing like an exploratory surgery to find out? Like, I'm young, I'm healthy. Let's figure out what's going on. And my doctor was like, no, absolutely not. And this is the crazy thing. So I take that at face value and decide I'm going to heal myself. Wow. And then Darlene, came with the LifeWave patches, which, where we started this conversation, I thought maybe this is it. And maybe it is. Maybe I will. I started a healing circle with my friends because I just felt like this was a big mountain of faith that I would need to have. And so when we go, it's going to go better. I don't know, like the Musketeers, who might as all go together. So I created a healing circle with some of my friends and we're doing like a weekly meditation to heal ourselves as well as the group and ripple out into the world. And so I've been setting up these things along the way to say yes to myself, I will accept, miraculous healing, divine healing, whatever that looks like, even though I can't see what it looks like now, what the problem is, and I will not know the result. Yeah. I'm just banking on a hope and a prayer that I've given it enough time to heal, and then we're going to try again. I mean, worst case scenario, I could have another ectopic and, they would want to take out my tube at that point, but that's right where I'm sitting right now. Is they want to take
no difference.
So, what am I losing? At least I'm, like dying on my feet rather than on my knees is the way that I'm looking at this. And so I'm going in with this perspective and I'm like, I'm going to heal this. This is going to take a lot of faith, completely different perspective than most would have. And I'm going against authority. Yeah. And then I start talking to my aunt who, she had an ectopic pregnancy, like 35 years ago. Okay. So she had my cousin, and then their second baby, it was ectopic, and then they had to take the tube. And I was like, oh, I thought you had the ectopic before, Victoria. And she's like, no, I was having fertility issues and they had to do a bunch of surgeries. And I said, well, what did they do? And she said, well, I had to go through this one test where they check out your tubes. And turns out one tube was like almost like completely irreparable. The other tube had a bunch of holes in it. So they took the one tube and they reconstructed the other tube and made one that would work like a patchwork quilt work well enough.
Okay.
This was 35 years ago
Yeah.
that they did all of this. And she
Yeah.
said, I'm so shocked that in 35 years, they're not even offering you that solution or
Right.
to even look at it. Like
I
it
was shocked
feels,
when you
yeah,
said that your doctor said that your tube was garbage, and then she couldn't tell you why. My first reaction was, well, then how does she know it's garbage?
right. Yeah.
I mean,
Just because it
that's the
got
part
stuck.
that blew my mind. I mean, it sounded like she went to judgment without science.
Yeah. Well, this last one, it got stuck in the tube. So they would presume that something's in there and that's why it got stuck and didn't go all the way through. Okay, but it's still a presumption. Like
Well,
we
it's
did
pretty
other
huge
tests.
presumption.
Exactly. We did other tests in 2020 and everything was clear according
So
to
so
the
so
tests
basically,
that
if
they
I
sent
get
me through.
constipation and my intestine is blocked, that means my intestine is garbage and should be removed.
With that theory,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what that adds up to.
absolutely.
What kind of science is that?
Absolutely.
That's my question. What kind of science is that? That's not science.
Exactly. That's it's maddening. Like, okay, great healthcare
Yeah.
system. I don't know.
Okay.
Like, for much as people,
Wow.
Canadians, for as much as Canadians, rag on the US healthcare system, and I've never had the opportunity to personally experience it. I have experienced our healthcare system here in Canada, and like this is what we got. They're
Mm,
just saying, oh no, it's just easier. We'll just cut it off. Well, cutting that off means that I can never have it. Like
right,
I have no other chance except for IVF. That's it.
right.
That's all.
Yeah.
Or surrogacy or
It's very
adoption.
extreme.
Like
Yeah.
that it's an extreme thing, but like it's an organ that was working 3 years ago and
And we
all
know
of a
that
sudden
how?
is not.
How do we know that it was working? Were you tested on that? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've had 3 ectopic pregnancies now. This last one in 2023 in September. My first one was in 2019. So in 2019, it was in the right one. They removed the right tube. And then in 2020 in May, so like 7, 8 months later, I had another one. And this time it was outside of the tube. It was
Oh,
on my left ovary.
okay.
So it wasn't even in the tube.
Yeah.
But they didn't believe that actually, because in 2020, when I was going through it, I said, it's not in my tube. And they said, you can't know that. Like, respectfully, you have no idea. And I said, respectfully, I do. It's not in my tube. Like,
You
check
could
again.
tell. You could
I
feel
could
it.
tell. Yeah, it just felt different. And when they double checked, because I demanded another ultrasound. And when I got that secondary ultrasound, I convinced the lady to show me, even though the ultrasound techs aren't supposed to show you anything. I just cried crocodile tears and just said, hey, I don't know what's going on and nobody will talk to me. Will you talk to me? And she was an older lady and she was like, yeah, sure. So she showed me everything. It was on my left ovary.
Wow.
So it
Yeah.
never went into the tube. So at that point in 2020, they were thinking the left tube is completely blocked. There's something wrong with it. Like basically it's garbage is what
Mm.
they were thinking. This same doctor, it's garbage. But they have one test that they can do. They have multiples, but here that what they offered me, which was an HSG test, which is where they put like this dye through the
Mhm.
system, through your uterus and through your tubes, and then they catch it on X-ray.
Mhm.
And so when I went through that in August of 2020, the dye went through my system so quickly that they almost missed the picture because they
Really?
weren't expecting it. Yeah. It
Wow.
was wide open. They were shocked. The doctor that was doing it, which was not my regular doctor, she was on holidays or something. This doctor was shocked because they were convinced it was closed at that
Yeah.
point. And that's why I had the second ectopic pregnancy. And she said, oh my gosh, it's open. This is amazing. Like, you're good to go. You're healthy. Everything looks good.
Wow.
And then we hadn't conceived since 2020.
Yeah.
It took us three years, even though we were trying. So I think that there's there's God activated in this process, or this is what
Mm.
I believe. Like
Mhm.
you don't just try for 3 years and then all of a sudden, like, boom, it happens almost to the exact same day as the
Wow.
2019
The same
pregnancy.
day. Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So 2 ectopic pregnancies, years apart, happening almost exactly a year, to the day.
Yeah.
Was it 1 year apart or 2 years apart, or what was it?
It was 2019 to 2020.
So 1 year apart.
Yeah.
Wow.
or sorry, that was the first one. And then the 2019 date to 2023, those dates were almost exactly the same.
So again, all three of them were basically in alignment with each other. That's really, that's spooky alignment.
Spooky alignment. Yeah.
Yeah. Twice you could say, okay, that's pretty crazy. 3 times you say, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Who's behind the curtain over here?
So, that's right. Right. So, I mean, for a doctor to say that there's nothing that we can do without actually going in and looking,
well, especially in light of the fact that they really missed it so badly the second time.
Yeah, it was fine the second time. So, I mean,
how could it be
did the
bad,
test,
then fine, and then bad again, and be considered garbage?
Yeah.
And apparently, the answer is because it is.
Because it is. That is the best answer that they can give me. Oh, well, things can change. Okay, yeah, but we don't know. Like we know it got stuck, but that's not a definitive answer of what's actually going on there, and I don't. So I don't know.
And why aren't we drawing the conclusion that it can change for the better? Because apparently it did change for the better at one point, and then it didn't.
Well, exactly.
So the only one that counts is the decline, not the improvement.
Absolutely. Well, in their mind, which is so incredibly frustrating because we don't talk about those things, the ability to heal your body. Again, going back to what we're talking about at the very beginning of this conversation, is that it's not designed to heal. So I think at some point, us as humans, as humanity, the collective, we need to decide that we're going to heal.
Which is what you're doing. You've taken control. You've said, all right, I know I'm fighting, I'm fighting the headwinds here. I'm fighting the system in a sense because I'm refusing to do it their way. I'm insisting on doing it this unproven, untested way of just following my instinct, following my intuition, and just doing what I can to heal myself, even though that is medically impossible. By the way, those are 2 words that should never go together: medical and impossible.
Right.
I've learned that personally. I've learned that in a number of different instances, that every time medicine tells me something can't be done, they're almost certainly wrong. Almost certainly. Yeah.
That makes me hopeful too, because we do have this, this connection to authority of they're right and I'm wrong. They know and I don't. And so you automatically think like, okay, well, maybe this is like, there is nothing that we can do. Well, no, I mean, I think healing my eyes last week was a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it can get better. I think it can. And I've seen other people do it. And I think, the conversation with Darlene and how she talked about all of those success stories, I thought, hey, I might as well give this a shot. They can't stop me from trying.
Right.
They might tell me it's not a very good idea. And there's definitely some precautions that will need to be taken to make sure I'm safe and healthy and, all of those things, which I am. But they can't stop me. I'm going to heal it. And when I heal it, then I will call them and tell them I'm pregnant. And they will be like, it's just a fluke. It must not have been garbage.
How about that? Yeah.
How about that?
I would be surprised when that happened. I'm not even going to say if. I'm going to say when. When that happens, I'm going to predict that they're going to claim that they never really said it was garbage in the first place. And the reason I say that is because of what I went through with my eyes, because I told you my eye story. Because I was diagnosed with macular degeneration back around 2005, 6, something like that. I don't remember exactly what the year was. And was told that the way these things progress, I would lose my eyesight in about 20, 25 years, something like that. Well, fast forward, and I haven't lost my eyesight. And not only that, they can't detect the macular degeneration anymore. And they said that was not possible to do. There are no cures for macular degeneration. So today they're telling me, well, we don't think you actually ever had it in the first place.
Right.
So who am I supposed to think is lying? The person who told me 20 years ago that I did, or the person who told me today that I didn't?
Yeah. Who's the fibber here today?
Who's the fibber? Or at the very least, which one is wrong? Let's put it that way. Which one was incorrect?
Absolutely.
We're not going to say that they were lying deliberately. Let's say they did it accidentally. All right. Well, which one was incorrect? Because one of them, they can't be both. Either I had it or I didn't. This is a binary situation. You either have it or you don't have it. Which is it?
Yeah. Do you think that on some level, when some of these systems were created, it was on the intention of I don't know if these are the right words, but like taking the power away from the people. Because I think that we have the ability to do more
Yeah.
and create our realities, but everywhere you look, that's not what is preached to you. Do you think that's
I think this
intentional?
I think this goes back to the original thing I was talking about how modern medicine here in the United States evolved out of a struggle against snake oil peddlers.
Mhm.
Because the doctors struggled with the idea that the snake oil peddlers were claiming cures, and they didn't like that. But they
Mhm.
also needed to come up with an alternative model, and their alternative model doesn't actually have any cures in it. But
No.
nevertheless, the way they have structured it, it basically is a reflection of what feels most comfortable to them, where the concept of cures is involved. And I think part of it, like for instance, with my case of macular degeneration, um, medicine has learned how to label diseases because patients wanted to know all along, what do I have?
Mhm.
Why is it that I'm experiencing these terrible symptoms? What disease do I have? And so they kept coming up with diseases. I think the whole disease model is tied into this same concept of, what is a cure? I think the two go hand in hand.
Mhm.
And medicine has for really since the beginning here in the US anyway, has been struggling with how do we define a model that incorporates cures that are never really cures using diseases that aren't aren't necessarily as clear cut as we like to think they are.
Yeah.
Because like in my case, they wanted to clear cut say I had macular degeneration, and now they clear cut say I don't have it. Well, which one is it?
You can't. Yeah. Which one is it?
But that's the struggle that they're dealing with. The struggle is we want to be able to label diseases. So you either have the disease or you don't. That's the way that model has to work. The
Mhm.
problem is, what if the human body doesn't work that way? What if the human body actually doesn't work around disease? I mean, we've
Mhm.
often talked metaphorically about how disease is dis-ease, not feeling at
Yeah.
ease, right?
Yeah.
Well, the way we feel can change. It can shift pretty regularly. So if you are in a dis-ease state and then you are managing to shift yourself to an ease state and those symptoms go away, did you have it or didn't you? It becomes very much a question that's philosophical much more than scientific.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So if we understand that, then we have to kind of ask ourselves, well, then what is the purpose of medicine? What is the purpose of healing? Is it about curing diseases or is it about helping to train ourselves to feel better?
Huh. What a question.
Yeah. Well, it pretty much defines the landscape, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because medical science, as it has been constructed to date, is about healing diseases, or at least about treating diseases. Maybe not healing because they don't actually heal anything, but they want to treat them. They want to, improve your symptomology and so forth, increase your lifespan and all that kind of thing. Where that
Well, and
disease protocol is concerned.
when you said or train them to feel better,
Mm,
I think that you were meaning in a different context that I took it. But
I was.
um, what I was thinking when you said that, immediately what came up for me is like we are so unconscious of how we feel in
Yes.
our everyday life, but
Mhm,
everything is training us, quote unquote, to feel better. Drink this pop and you'll feel
mhm,
good. Go on
mhm,
this shake
mhm.
diet and you'll slim down and feel better.
Right.
And so when you asked the question, I was like, yeah, medicine is to train people to feel better with quotation marks.
It is.
Because
It's
I think
true.
some of it is like that. Yeah.
And we also have the subjective aspect of that feeling better too. For instance, you were able to identify that you actually had a pregnancy that was not stuck in the fallopian tube,
Hmm.
despite the fact that your doctors insisted that it was, because you
Hmm.
felt it. You could physically feel it, and you
Yeah.
just knew on some level. You couldn't necessarily define it, but you knew on some level, nope, that statement is not true. It's not in the tube.
Yeah.
Well, medical science has a little trouble with that
Hmm.
because medical science wants everything to be done objectively.
Hmm.
which is really odd because they don't do a whole lot of things objectively, but that's another topic. The fact is, though, that they want this to be an objective thing, and you're dealing with a subjective feeling.
Hmm. Yeah, you can't
So
quantify it.
you can't quantify it. No, there's no way to
You can't
quantify it.
see it.
No, no.
Yeah.
So we're introducing subjectivity into science. Boy, that's going to rub a lot of authoritarians the wrong way.
Whoopsies.
Yeah, but I think it's critical. I think it's
Yeah.
critically important. Here's another piece of that same puzzle. One of my biggest challenges that I see facing science is the fact that they're always trying to come up with drugs, right? And they're trying to come up with drugs that test out in such a way that they're able to show that a group tested with it versus a group tested without it gets a better result. And so that
Mhm.
objectively so-called proves, although it's not really proof, demonstrates that there is greater efficacy using that new drug. That's the basic idea there. In order to accommodate that, they eliminate placebo effect because placebo effect is, well, the drug isn't actually there, so you can't include that in your results.
Mhm.
And yet, study after study that it gets done ends up having better results from placebo than from the actual drug.
Mhm.
But the placebo always gets thrown out. So I object to that because I say, well, if placebo works, who cares whether it was with or without a drug? If you got the desired result, you got the desired result.
Yeah, if it's a sticker or it's a sugar pill or it's a
Difference doesn't make.
whatever,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
What we wanted was to heal the thing or cure the thing or accomplish whatever
Yeah.
the goal was that we were trying to accomplish. Well, that flies in the face of what science wants to do, and part of it is because of the reason we just described, because it's subjective. Placebo is very subjective.
But imagine what we could do for the world if those, because my assumption of medicine, and it could be wrong, is if they do a study and the placebo does better by a certain amount than the actual drug, then they throw out the drug. Is that correct?
Usually.
Ish.
Usually.
Usually.
What
Okay.
it actually comes down to is not so much whether or not placebo is more or less effective than the drug, but rather is the drug more or less effective than not drug, and you measured that by removing placebo from the equation.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just say it worked the first way that I said, and they
Okay.
just throw them out if the placebo works better. But imagine if they took those sugar pills, whatever, and they actually packaged them, maybe even under that drug name. They could call it lollipop, whatever. It doesn't matter what it's called, but they give it to the doctors like at a super discount or like whatever it is, and it starts making people's lives better instead of just doing nothing. Oh, we don't have a pill for that yet, or whatever, right? Then people would start getting better and feel healthier and all of these things. Like the world would change.
I'll go one better on that one, because the whole reason for withholding the information from the patient about whether or not it's a placebo is to keep the patient from knowing whether or not there's a placebo, so that doesn't taint the results. But in fact, there's a great deal to be desired from telling that the patient that there's a placebo involved. And in fact, studies have demonstrated that when you have one study group, one group of patients that is given something and they don't know whether it's placebo, and a second group and they do know that it's placebo, the results are the same. They still get the same results, whether or not they know that there's a placebo.
What?
Not always, but very often that's the way it plays out. Like the
Wow.
placebo effect doesn't really matter to the patient very much. So the way I think about it is, what would happen if our doctors played up placebo? Not tried to hide it, not given cheap pills and not being told what the pills are for. But what if doctors, and by playing up placebo, what I mean is, what if doctors played up the idea that your mental state, your mental activity directly plays a role in how well or poorly you heal?
Mm-hmm.
Because we do know that that is true.
Mm-hmm.
We especially know that
Yep.
it's true where pain is concerned, because that's where 99% of the placebo studies are. They don't actually like to study disease. It scares the bejesus out of them to study that. So they don't do that very often. Although when they have actually produced very positive results for placebo. But for the most part, placebo and removing placebo from studies is involved with pain and pain relief. And those are the only kinds of studies they're willing to do. And in those studies, they have learned that placebo is very, very, very effective. I mean, that's what the original experience was that led to double-blind studies in the first place. It was the experience in World War II, where they didn't have enough pain relief for the soldiers in the field, in the field hospitals when these soldiers were injured. There was not enough morphine. So they would give them fake morphine and then the pain would go away, thereby demonstrating that the placebo effect worked.
Yeah.
So in other words, we know it works.
Yeah.
We know that it's effective. Why are we so hell-bent on not including it in medical protocols when we know that it works? Not that we hope that it works. We know that it works.
Yeah.
That's the part that bends my mind. Like, you guys, we're going to be so married to our really messed up scientific model that we won't allow people to heal from placebo because it's not objectively scientific?
Right.
Really?
That sounds dumb.
It does when you frame it that way. That's the way I look at it, I have to admit. So tying us back to what we originally started the conversation with, these patches that Darlene was telling us about a couple weeks ago. I like what you're doing because you're saying, well, screw what the doctors have said. I'm going to use what you and I and others listening to this program believe to be true. The power of our mind really does play a major role in our ability to heal ourselves and to maintain healthy state. So why not do the same thing when it comes to conceiving a child and having a family? And the answer, and theoretically, is yeah, there's every reason to think that that's going to work. So I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. And the obvious challenge is keeping that belief. In other words, building that placebo effect within your own mind. Yeah. Which is what you're doing. You've already described. You've set up circles of people who have a similar interest, and you're all kind of giving each other support in that direction. Well, that's what you do. That's how you build mind belief. You do it by actively believing and working with others to believe and reinforcing and supporting and all that kind of thing. That's how you build belief. That's how you build belief about anything, right? By giving your attention to it positively, affirmatively, directly.
Yep.
So that's what you're doing. And what I'm doing is not all that different, although I'm not creating circles, but I'm putting these patches on my skin in the belief that they could work.
Yeah.
They could actually heal my Achilles and my knee and my ankle faster. And by the way, my ankle is doing really, really well.
Good.
My knee is like 95%. It's not quite there yet, but it's almost there. The Achilles still has soreness to it. There are a couple of sore points, but even the therapist today was noting that even as recently as a week ago, if she tested, she would find the sensitive area responding to her touch a lot more than she was getting today.
So it's working.
Is it? Maybe. I don't know. I don't dare say after a week. Maybe it is. If I continue to get that and faster healing, then I'll say, yeah, it's working. If it just gets to this point and kind of stays at this point for a while, then I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
It's encouraging. I hope it's true. I mean,
I hope it's true too.
Perfectly honest, I'm really sick of having this Achilles issue. I've had it for 5-6 months now, and really, I'm really tired of it. Because you feel it every day, and one time or another during the day, you say, oh, Jesus, I can feel it heating up again. I'm so tired of this. You want to just go through a whole week where, wow, there was nothing. It was like, I just had normal leg.
Yeah, nothing to complain about.
It just worked the way it's supposed to, the way it's been working for the last bunch of years, for decades.
Yeah.
It's been working this way,
Yeah.
That's
just wait. Maybe the patches will work and then everything will be healed and then you'll like reverse age your like Achilles. And it'll be like bouncing like when you were 20.
That would be wonderful. That's definitely what I'm hoping for. I have to admit too, I'm still thinking about, because Darlene was explaining to us, and in fact, I was texting with her just before we started doing the show today. She was pointing out that what the X39 patch, which is their main patch, primarily does is it boosts your glutathione levels, which theoretically also boosts the body's ability to take dormant stem cells and activate them. That's what we were talking about with her 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Now, that's the theory. In practice, do we know for sure that that's going to happen? No, not yet.
No.
So yeah, that's why it's kind of a test and wait and see and do it
Yeah.
as positively as you can. That's the way I'm looking at it. Now,
Yeah.
there is one other thing
Me
I want to
too.
mention. There's one other thing I want to mention, even though we're kind of over time here. Because I also, one of the ways I did my skepticism thing was I started doing some research on the company.
Mhm.
And today we have the internet, so there are review sites that review products and services and software services and all kinds of stuff. And so I went to one of them. By the way, for anyone who ever wants to investigate those, one of the more popular sites out there that does this kind of thing is called Trustpilot. So if you ever want to go look something up, look up Trustpilot and then look up the product or service there, and you'll find out what other people think about it. So I went to trustpilot.com, looked up LifeWave, which is the name of this company that Darlene was promoting, and found that overwhelmingly people are happy with it, but there are always some people who are unhappy, right?
Yeah.
Interesting thing. You'll remember that one of the proposed benefits that Darlene suggested to us is that it helps to lower blood pressure. Well, a
Right.
number of people were reporting severely raised blood pressure to the point where their
Really?
doctors urged them to stop using these patches. That creates two thoughts in my mind. First of all, well, the patch
Interesting.
was doing something. Not necessarily what they wanted to do, but apparently the patch had some sort of efficacious role. You know, it was having an effect. But also, it demonstrates that, as with anything that has an effect, you're not going to get uniformly positive results. There are going to be some people who have negative or even adverse results. I mean,
Yeah.
adverse side effects. How often do we hear about that kind of thing? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I actually took that as a positive. This thing has negative side effects. Well, shoot. I mean, there's nothing transdermal. There's nothing that actually gets transmitted through the skin by this thing. It's just reflecting light, body light back and forth, right? And
Yeah.
yet, even that apparently produced this high blood pressure situation in a few people. I take comfort in that. I don't want to have high blood pressure. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying
No.
it did something.
Yeah, you can prove that it tangibly did
It
something.
did something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Even though it was
apparently it does
negative,
do
it was
something.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were other people that, like I said, there were a lot of people who were reporting all kinds of very positive results.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, the jury's still out on this one, but it's encouraging.
Yeah. We're about to find out. So
We
stay
are.
tuned for
Well,
more
yeah,
updates.
we're voluntary test subjects.
Yeah, that's right. Watch us go through this journey.
So, and we're going to have another time when we'll have Darlene come back. In fact, she's already lined up one or two people to come on to tell their own personal stories about what they've experienced using
Cool.
patches. Yeah. So we're going to have
Oh, that's so
we're going
awesome.
to do some specials on. We might not even do it at our regular time. Just because it's always hard to get somebody into the schedule because the schedule's always
Yeah.
pretty solidly booked. But we may end up doing like a special date, and so I'll make sure that I'll include you in that special date so you can be a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can be one of the what's called testimonials.
The testimonials, yes.
Yep. Because it's gonna work. It's just gonna work.
I like that. I love that attitude. Great. All
That's
right.
right.
Yeah. So stay tuned, folks. This is going to get fun. And it's not going to
Yeah.
happen quickly. Don't anticipate that we're going to have a whole bunch of shows in the next week or two. It's not going to work that way.
No.
But we are going to do this. So, just keep staying subscribed and keep following and keep listening to episodes, and you'll follow. You'll get what happens. You'll be the first to know.
Absolutely. I mean, and if nothing else, I hope that it inspires the people that are listening to us so that, there's not only one possibility or one road that you can travel with anything in life and everything in life, and that you really are the creator of your reality. So choose to create and start creating, baby.
When we have a guest on, I usually ask you to give us a summary thought. You just gave us a summary thought. I didn't even ask you for it. That's cool.
I was too early.
You just couldn't wait. That's all. You had to bring it right in.
I just couldn't wait. I just dropped right in. I thought I'd say it.
Very cool. All right. Well, I will see you next week. Looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
And thank you to all our podcast listeners who continue to listen to all this crazy stuff we talk about. But boy, we're having a good time. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.